Hi, welcome back. I have another video where we'll be taking a look at another Warhammer community article. It's week 5 of the Old World Almanac, and this time we're looking at morale and psychology. Over the past few weeks, we've seen strategy phase, movement phase, shooting phase, and combat phase articles, and these explained how each of the 4 phases of the game would work, and also explained that magic was no longer its own phase, and that's something we'll get to later in this video. So as a battle is fought, there's a variety of reasons why your unit might have to resolve a morale test of some kind or deal with some form of psychology. Morale, the most obvious one we get usually, is going to be the break test. They gave us a bunch of reasons as to why you will win or lose a combat last week, and what we're learning now is what the different what the different tiers of breaking mean. So basically, you either pass or fail your combat. You don't get to roll to see if you stay anymore in the same way we used to. In the past, you would roll 2 dice, consult your leadership minus any modifiers. So if you lost by 3, it's at -3. If your guys rolled equal to or under that new leadership, they would stay. If you rolled over that new leadership, they would run away. As simple as that. The enemy could then choose to stay and hold their ground, or they could pursue and try to run you down and kill your whole unit, anyone that survived. Now it's a little bit different. You either draw or win, and if you don't win, you lose. So draw is the only time nothing happens. Um, Winning means somebody lost. So the loser then has to make that break test. They're then going to take a leadership test with their basic leadership and any modifiers that they've received as a result of losing. These modifiers are negatives. There's no positive modifiers to losing a combat. You can't get a +1 because you lost. You're only going to get a -1 or worse. They give us an example of sword masters who are high elves with a leadership of 8 who lost by 3 points to stone trolls from the orcs and goblins army list. Now, because they lost by 3, they've automatically gone over to a break test. The break test is simply, will they run away completely? It's called break and flee. This is what you find down here. Fall back in good order, which we'll explain in a moment, or give ground, which we'll explain after that. So starting with break and flee, this is when the enemy has broken your unit and they're now going to panic and run away without any sense of order or discipline. They're just gone. And that doesn't mean they're outright dead. It just means that you have lost control of that unit. They are going to roll 2d6 and run away that many inches away from the enemy unit, or if there's more than one unit, the biggest unit that they were fighting. And this could lead to whole other problems depending on where that bigger unit is facing. But essentially, they run 2d6 inches, and the enemy can then choose to pursue. They just roll 2d6 themselves, and if it's equal to or more than what your unit ran, your unit is wiped out. If it's less than what you ran, your unit gets away, and on your next strategy phase, you'll have a chance to rally, although you don't necessarily lose these on your on the enemy turn. You could lose a combat on your own turn, and then you won't get to rally for what will feel like 2 turns. And you break and flee when you roll higher than your natural leadership. So these guys were leadership 8. This is basically just, failing any test. There was no chance of passing if you rolled a 9. Your guys just run away. Then we move on to fall back in good order. This is a pretty good one, and it's new. This is actually really interesting, this one. Basically, if you roll higher than your new modified leadership, so 8 at -3 becomes a 5 leadership on these elves, you roll a 6, a 7, or 8. It's still technically lower than your natural unmodified leadership, and what's going to happen is your guys are going to leave the combat in much the same way as break and flee happens. You're going to roll 2 dice, and you're going to be able to go that far directly away from the enemy. You can also choose to get rid of your lower die, as they write it, and you're just going, oh, sorry, that's here. You're going to go back that far, and you're going to automatically rally, unlike break and flee, who, again, you don't get to rally until your next strategy phase. These guys rally right as soon as they stop moving, and then you can reform. This allows you to get back anywhere from, say, 2 inches, maybe even 1 inch, I guess, all the way to 12 inches as I read it. And that might be dependent on how you want to be situated. But basically, they can reform any direction you want, and they can then be facing the enemy. So I kind of take it as if you roll really high, you can choose to go back upwards of 12 inches and then just sit there facing a new direction because you could look at their movement and know that, oh, it's a movement 4 unit with a die 6 charge maximum, means they can't catch you. They can't, charge you the next turn. It might be beneficial to have your unit facing a new direction, ready to go do something else that's more reasonable, like maybe fighting trolls wasn't a great idea. Um, Although in most cases you probably won't be that far away, in which case you're just going to rally and reform facing that enemy or any other enemies you're scared might charge you before your next turn. But overall, this is a pretty good one. I like this. This is super different from what we've had before. It's going to mean that you don't necessarily lose your unit because as your guys fall back, the enemy is also going to get to pursue just like a normal break and flee. If your guys fell back 6 inches, is what it worked out to be, and then you decide, well, I'm only going to go 6 inches, let's say 7 inches. I'm just going to stop there, reform, and face them again because I know a charge is coming. If they chase and catch you now, they don't kill your unit. Instead, the combat just continues. And this is an interesting change in the way things worked. I don't recall in any situation where a unit could break from combat and be caught and not be destroyed. Maybe there were some special rules in someone's army that did it, but not that I recall. This is interesting. So it's basically break and flee, but you don't automatically lose them if you're caught. Giving ground, that's the best one. That's where you basically roll equal to or under the new modified leadership. So again, 8 leadership at -3 becomes 5. The elves roll 2, 3, 4, or 5. They're going to give ground. So instead of breaking and fleeing, instead of running away in an orderly fashion, these guys simply back up 2 inches and they get ready. They set themselves. Um, they lost the combat, but they're not disheartened. They're ready for more. They back up, they get ready, and the enemy can then choose to step up and continue, or if it's their upcoming turn, maybe they're going to want to wait and make that charge to get some bonuses. It's going to be dependent on what the game situation is on that one. But again, this is a very different outcome from what we're used to with break tests. I really like it. In general, I really like the break test chart. I think it adds a new element to the game. And, maybe long term it's going to turn out to be really frustrating or over complicated even for players like myself who are used to complicated rules. And it might seem like more often than not you won't bother with anything so elaborate that you need this many rules. But I still like that the option is there. If it ever hits a point where I think it's too much, it's just a matter of ignoring it. But it's nice to have in writing a new way to play. Psychology. Let's get into the next part. This is the psychological effects of war that our armies will be affected by either positively or negatively throughout the battle. So they suggest there's a few here, and there might be more. These are going to be in the universal special rules that we're going to find out more about later. Probably in 2 weeks, I feel seems pretty reasonable based on what's coming next week. But these things here: fear, terror, stupidity, animosity, frenzy, unbreakable, stubborn, and hatred. I do think there's others I can't recall offhand, and that's fine. Whether this is all there is or there's more, what matters is that they do seem to work relatively the same from what we've been shown, and that we're going to find them easily in the Universal Special Rules section of our core book. For those who don't know, older Warhammer games had Universal Special Rules that were shared. They suggested this was coming back for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, but it really didn't. Every unit has their own name for certain buffs or debuffs that they offer out in the army during the course of a game. There are some that are shared, but for the most part, there's still a lot of like special rules that, have their own name, but maybe every army has one or two units with that exact same rule, reroll any ones that miss, or reroll all shots that miss if the target's near an objective marker. I've seen at least, you know, every army I've seen play so far has that rule on somebody. There might be somebody whose army doesn't have that, but so far everybody has that, which makes it a universal special rule. And that should have been in its own section of the book so that I don't have to check somebody else's army book, their index cards or whatever, and try to figure out, well, you called it what? Oh, okay, that sounds like nothing in my book. What does it mean? And then they'll explain it, and you'll say, oh, I have that exact same rule. We call it this. Here we just have the fear, terror, stupidity, animosity, frenzy, unbreakable, stubborn, with the exact same names that they had before, and simply their rules written down in the special rules section of the book. They're not scattered all over, they're easy to find. And they give a couple of examples, the first one being fear. So, for instance, if you face a unit of skeletons and you have lower unit strengths, let's say there's 30 skeletons and you have 25 spearmen, there are more skeletons than you have spearmen, so you take a leadership test, and if you were trying to charge them, you are going to fail the charge automatically. If they were trying to charge you, or you were already in combat with them when you made this fear test, you have to take you were going to lose one to hit. So a 4 to hit becomes a 5 to hit. This is a really powerful effect. Fear has always been a very strong psychological effect because your guys, as they become scared, they become less efficient in combat. So basically, it works the same, other than before in 8th edition, you would become weapon skill 1, meaning you'd be very easy to hit and have a hard time hitting anyone else. Now it's just a flat -1. I think that's a lot better. Um, you know, it would be scary to fight skeletons, but I feel almost like certain things were, they were both fear causing, but they should have felt different. This way here, fear is just -1 to hit. I guess what I'm saying is that some things, would make you have weapon skill 1 and I could understand it. Other ones I was like, I guess that's scary, but it doesn't feel like it should make your guys weapon skill 1 because they're scared. They shouldn't be that scared. A simple -1 is way better anyways. You don't have to check a chart to see what's the difference because, I have 4 weapon skill, you have 3 weapon skill. That means I hit you on a 3. I don't need to check and see what happens if I have a 1 and you have a 3. I simply take my 3 that I hit on and I just take a 1 away from it, so that becomes a 4. I like that. It's not bad at all. Then they give us terror. That's much worse. It's like something that's scary, but even scarier. Monsters tend to be scary like this. And if you're charged by one of these units, you take a leadership test automatically. And if you pass, it's fine. You just continue as normal. But if you fail, you can't do a charge reaction like flee, stand and shoot, hold ground. Your guys just run away. There's no choice. And if this monster's close enough while you run away, it still gets to make that charge roll. And if you're within range of its charge distance, it runs you down. At least that's what it used to do. I assume it's going to be the same thing. Um, and it's also a -1 to your leadership. So not only is it going to make your unit run away when it charges you, or I assume if you charge it, it's at -1. So a 7 leadership human becomes a 6 leadership human. That's pretty good. So they do give us an example of a unit stat line and a unit sheet. This is a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. It's from the Warriors of Chaos list, or at least it used to be. It might be Beastman now. And basically, it's a rare level monster and sort of a hero. He's got really good stats, and as you can see, the stat line is exactly the same as it is in the older Warhammer Fantasy books, going back to at least 6th edition. So anyone who's familiar with the stat lines, it's the exact same thing. Movement, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative, attacks, and leadership. If you're not familiar with that, now you at least know what each of um, those letter combinations mean, and they just basically tell you how good a model is in combat or in shooting, as in terms of speed or whatever. And we also get the special rules for this unit. He's got Armor Bane 2, which is probably some sort of like -2 to armor. Armored Hide 2, which is probably a +2 to his save. Close Order, I'm not sure. Ensorcelled Weapons, that's interesting to see in the Warriors of Chaos 8th edition book, possibly 7th as well, but I don't think I own that one to check. Basically, an ensorcelled weapon was an upgrade that certain knights could have, where they would get +1 to their strength at all times, and they would have magical attacks. This suggests he's going to have a 7 strength with magic attacks. He's also immune to psychology. All that stuff we're talking about, fear, terror, hatred, all of it. None of it affects him. He's immune. He's a large target. It's nice to see that because all large target did, like I talked about in the past, I believe the shooting video, is it basically means that a target that's large can be seen from anywhere on the battlefield unless it's behind terrain or other models that are also classified as large. That's the only way it can hide. So, like a hill might be considered large, and even though the model might be physically bigger than the hill, for the purpose of gameplay, you've agreed that the hill is tall enough that he can hide behind it. He's also got Stomp Attacks, die 3+1. Stomp Attacks were a classic part of 8th edition that was added for larger units, although they were called Thunder Stomps at his size. I wonder if they've combined them. Stomp Attack before was just one attack at your strength that automatically hit. So it seems like maybe they've put them together. We'll have to see how that goes. Storm Call, which I do think was a special rule for the the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, which had to do with basically he was immune to lightning and maybe had some sort of lightning attack. I forget offhand. Then he has Terror, so he causes terror. That's the -1 leadership, and they automatically run away. And he has the Quickening Storm. That's another ability. Basically, he has two abilities that I think were like something he had before, and then he has a bunch of the more universal ones we mentioned above. And then they give us Frenzy. Now, Frenzy, this is a really fun one. It's simply your guys, your warriors, are in a frenzy. They're all worked up, the blood is pumping, they're hot, they're angry, and they just want to get into combat. It's really common to see this with Warriors of Chaos who are dedicated to Khorne. That's their power in 8th edition, if they're Khorne. They're all frenzied. Now, Frenzy is great. It's +1 attack. That doesn't sound like a lot till you have 10 or 15 guys attacking, and suddenly it's a lot more attacks than you normally would have otherwise. And that goes for any weapon. It could be a guy with an axe or a guy with a two-handed axe. Having an extra attack at strength 5 or 6, pretty powerful. Unfortunately, there is a downside to this. While they're immune to fear and terror, they unfortunately are also immune from common sense. What this means, what I'm getting at, is that they will always charge if able, and they can never choose to flee from a combat or from a charge. So if they're about to get charged by a dragon and they're not ready to fight a dragon, they'll still stay there and take it. And if they're in range of that dragon on your turn, they have to charge it, even if you know they can't kill that dragon. So clever players will use Frenzy against you. Keep that in mind. If you have a unit with Frenzy, it doesn't always work for you. There are many of the psychological rules that take away control of your units. Stupidity takes away control of your units. Frenzy does here. Fear and terror, to some extent or completely, will take away your unit's ability to listen to you. It's just there is a whole bunch of reasons you're not going to have full control of your army. And while that doesn't sound good, it's actually a really strong part of what makes this game so great, is that there is a level of random, but also really flavorful interactions, and psychology is definitely one of them. It's nice to see psychology look so strong in this edition, and more importantly, so the same. Right, and as always, they seem to be ending the article with some magic. Um, they give us a new spell for dark magic this week. It's called Battle Lust. And basically, a dark mage is going to fill a friendly unit with rage and make them want to go, shed blood. Blood, get them, pumped up for bloodshed. It's a enchantment, which I assume means basically it's an augment like we had in 8th edition. It just targets a friendly unit and gives them a bonus. It's cast on a 9 plus, so it seems like it's a fairly high cast compared to a lot of what we've seen, which I believe were often 7 plus. I don't think we've seen anything above a 10 yet. And it's got a range of 12 inches, so you do have to be close, but often I bet you're going to be basically casting it on a unit that's very close to you, if not the unit that the mage is in. And until the end of this turn, the target friendly unit is going to gain Frenzy and Hatred all enemies. So it's got Frenzy, like we just talked about, and Hatred, if we don't know what that is, it's just the ability to get rerolls. I've talked about this before in like the Empire video. You hate that unit, so you try harder to hit them. You reroll to hit. So if you miss, you get one chance to hit them again. This goes against all enemies. Normally, hatred is all enemies, but there are times that it's going to be in brackets a certain faction. Dark elves will hate high elves. I don't even know offhand another example. You might see like dwarves hate Skaven, things like that. Dwarves hate goblins or greenskins. There's a few reasons it's going to be specific. Mostly, though, hatred just tends to be the keyword hatred, and it's against anything. This one here is, specifying anyways that it is against all enemies. So this is shown off as the last spell before we get our article on magic next week, that's great. We finally get to see how magic works in this game. It's one of those things that I've been so desperate to see. What have they done to the magic phase now that they've removed it and spread it across all the other phases? So I guess not what have they done to the magic phase. We already know that. What have they done to spells? We're going to finally understand how they work. Is it just going to be roll a couple of dice for every wizard because they'll get X many spells? Are they going to have so many power dice they can work with? How powerful, how high of a casting value can the spells go up to? We had spells that went up to like 24 and 25 casting power, even in 7th edition, with, say, the Cursed 13th spell or something like that. It's a Skaven spell. It's the dreaded 13th spell, where it was like cast on a 25. You had some crazy high casting values. I don't think we've seen anything above a 10. I think 9 plus is the highest we've seen so far, offhand, that I remember. Yeah, so it's interesting that we haven't seen very high numbers yet, and maybe they're saving that for later, the more like ooh-ah spells. But yeah, just knowing that next week we're finally going to get that answer is nice. And yeah, just in general, I'm very happy with how this is going. As always, these articles are just very reassuring that they are respecting Warhammer Fantasy for what it was and not trying to take the license and once again turn it into something else. They've already turned it into Age of Sigmar, and it just seems like 5 weeks of validation that everything that I was seeing for the last couple of years, to me, felt like we were going to get a very similar game. Although at the same time, I admit that there was times where I still thought, they're going to somehow change this. They're going to simplify it somewhere. But I was so happy to be wrong week after week. This just seems like the same game with some tweaks. And that just is a normal thing throughout editions. There were always changes to the editions. And while there are some very significant turns from normal gameplay here compared to what we used to have, it's still Warhammer Fantasy, and I'm really excited. Hopefully you guys are too. If you have any thoughts or comments on this video, or just what's going on with the old world in general, leave those in the comments. And as always, everybody have a great day. Thanks so much for watching.